Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Welln'ish. As you know, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so I'm really excited about this week's guests. I have Debbie Magwood, who is the founder of the West Island Cancer Wellness Center, as well as Sandy Ftizpatrick, who is the participant care coordinator and registered nurse at the West Island Cancer Wellness Center. So welcome, ladies. So happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Nice to be here.
I'd like to jump in right away. Debbie, would you mind telling us a little bit about what the West Island Cancer Wellness Center is?
So we are a registered charity located in the West Island area of Montreal. And what we do is we offer what is called psychosocial, or what we call cancer wellness care for people experiencing cancer. Basically what that is dividing wellness care into three areas of care. So mind, body, and spirit. We complement the medical system by offering the programs that fall into those realms.
Okay. How did the West Island Cancer Wellness Center come to be? What were your motivations to starting it?
Oh, that's a little bit of a story. I guess it started back in my 20s when I was originally diagnosed with cancer. And I went searching for some added support or resources in the community. And I really didn't find anything. So, I kind of put that idea into my pocket. And I was working on my master's in counseling psychology and, started doing some research. And then, boom, I get diagnosed again. And again, that whole idea of looking out for resources came zooming into my life because anyone who's been diagnosed with cancer knows it's pretty hard to be diagnosed the first time, but the second time is pretty devastating. So again, I kind of fell into, robotically following the medical system, which I'm extremely grateful for. And just put the idea of resources aside. Then about 10 years after that, I was researching online, and I came across this whole movement of living well with cancer, and I fell in love with it immediately. I thought, what a great concept, because we have to figure out how we can learn to live with our challenges in life, and cancer being one of them. And I love the idea of integrating empowerment and holistic care and different ways of support into the medical system. And I put together a business plan and just started working on it on the side, doing my research. And then I got diagnosed with cancer again. And at that point I thought, either I'm a really slow learner and I need to be slapped across the face with a lesson to be learned, or there's something here I need to do. So at that point, I finished off the business plan. I gathered a bunch of professionals from the community together, and I said, hey, could this work? And unanimously, every single person said, absolutely, it's imperative. So quit my jobs and threw myself into trying to make it happen. And luckily, the West Island community came together and supported us both emotionally and financially. And we were able to open back in 2008.
What did the center look like back in 2008, and how has it evolved since then?
So we rented a tiny little farmhouse in Beaconsfield. We had 24 participants registered at the beginning, and we offered a handful of activities. The cutest thing about this little farmhouse is we had our exercise studio where we did yoga, and the the funny part about it is you couldn't do any poses with your hands in the air. Everything had to be sort of in the downward dog position because the ceiling was like less than 6 feet tall. And it could only take like 2 people and the instructor. But it was an amazing learning experience to be in this tiny little house where we offered like incredible quality care. But what became super difficult about that experience was we couldn't keep up with the demand. Mm-hmm. I remember one day we had to decide as a collective team that we were going to have to put people on a wait list. Mm-hmm. And it was something we vowed we would never do because there's no wait list for cancer. You know, when you have it and you need the support and the resources, you need it now. And I remember hitting the send button on my email out to the board of directors and out to the staff. And I bursted into tears. And then I literally could hear in this tiny little house where we were all pretty much on top of each other, who was reading the email, because I could hear their sadness as well. So that basic moment was the moment we decided we need to grow, we need to get into a bigger house. And so we did. We started a capital campaign, we raised $3 million, and we moved into our big cancer wellness center, which is located in Kirkland.
Okay. Can you give us some examples of resources that are available? You mentioned the description, social, I forget the other words, but can you just explain what those resources look like?
Mm-hmm. So cancer wellness has many tenets. It has social, it has emotional, it has spiritual, it has financial, it has physical. I didn't say that already. And our programs revolve around all those different tenets of care. So, for example, we would have a yoga class or a sound healing class, nutritional cooking, Reiki, reflexology, osteopathy, and the way that people select those classes are very much based on their own particular needs. So when a participant comes into the center, they are given the opportunity to do what we call a wellness wheel, which looks at all the different aspects of life. And then it highlights through this interview where a focus might need to be placed, or a little bit more focus needs to be placed. And then we highlight what classes that we offer that will help with that particular focus. So if physical pain, for example, is a high focus, we might want to suggest some Reiki. We might want to suggest a consultation with Sandy. So those are some of the resources that we have internally. We also offer our services across Canada. Our remote program, which we call our Living Well with Cancer Network. And in that resource, people can call in and look and ask us for, a place where they can purchase wigs, for example, in Nova Scotia, or a support group in their area, or they might just need some emotional support, to which we could offer either through our remote platform or over the phone.
Okay. That's so interesting. Is that something that came out of the pandemic, or is that something you have always been doing?
We launched our Canadian initiative prior to the pandemic, but at that point it was really a telephone referral and support service. We had piloted our remote classes, so our Zoom classes, and we're ready to launch it prior to the pandemic. But the pandemic gave us that little push to move things forward. Because during the pandemic, like everywhere else, we had to put a lot of our services onto Zoom. Although not all, we were deemed, deemed an essential service right off the bat. So our doors closed for a very short period of time. really just for us to develop a strong health and safety protocol to make sure that people who were coming in would be safe or as safe as possible.
I see. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, I actually, when I was first starting my career, I was volunteering weekly at the Wellness Center as an osteopath. And I have some of my truly like best clinical memories working there. It was, and that's what I love so much about you guys, is the working together, like bridging the gap between the medical system and the, I don't want to just say alternative care, but let's say alternative care for everything, you know, that's like physio, osteo, because that's so important. And I love that you guys really highlight bridging that. And I remember at the time I was working so much with, it was any woman that I would see who had breast cancer also had a problem with their shoulder or had a lymphedema in their arms. And I remember asking so many people, were you ever told that you can do work on your scar? And it was never mentioned. Or were you ever told about the effects that the tissue can have after radiation or chemotherapy? And so I was just shocked at how little awareness there was. So I think it's so great that you exist, because at the end of the day, the doctor, what they want is really survival, right? They want to get after the big life-threatening things. And then unfortunately, everything around supporting your life, like having a rich life, even with a diagnosis, comes from you guys, comes from awareness, comes from bringing those resources into someone's life. And I don't know, it just always really stuck with me, like how great the work is that you guys do. And I just hope that in several other domains that we get more communication with medical and like spiritual, physical, everything that you mentioned before. It's so important whenever there is any sort of illness, you know?
Yeah, very well said.
Yes.
You know, if we look across the world in different countries, this whole synergy between Western medicine and complementary other medicines or alternative medicines is far stronger than it is here in North America. And I couldn't agree with you more. It would be amazing if, you know, the realms could come together.
I can add that I agree. The communications that we have between each other, and especially that's one of the big points that I do, is to help them navigate. And the points that you said, Riley, you know, especially to be aware of when they have a surgery, or if they take chemo, or if they take radiation. Definitely there are certain treatments that can be done. So we're very fortunate to have intern kinesiologists to assess our participants, that can see the level of exercise they can do before surgery, after surgery. And
amazing.
Especially, as you say, after radiation, you know, for fibrosis syndrome, to be assessed by a physio-oncologist, which we have once a month that we come in. So we're very, very fortunate for that, for our participants to have.
It's fantastic.
The sad reality is that, you know, places like ours don't exist across Canada. There's actually very few of them. So not, you know, we need to continue this strategy to educate the community and educate cancer patients and survivors to fully grasp the magnitude of the impact that cancer wellness will have in their lives. You know, we are not just these passive recipients of disease. We can feel that empowerment. We can take control in what we might presume is a situation or a disease that is out of control. Learning how to do that, learning how to live well and take care of yourself in order to help yourself heal in whichever capacity that is imperative.
What I also found remarkable when I was volunteering there was every single participant that I met, they saw a silver lining, you know, like they saw a lesson in their diagnosis, and they were so optimistic. And like some of them even to the point of saying, like, if this didn't happen to me, I like this happened to me for the better. I changed because of this, and there is a reason that it happened. And I was so surprised by that. And like I think if everywhere, like you said, across the nation had that, there would be so much more positivity surrounding healing and what they're going through. And anyways, I just really attribute that to you. And I just want to double down. And I completely agree that that should be the goal. Like, I just don't understand how this isn't accessible everywhere. It's so important. I'm sure there's going to be, I'm a big advocate for endometriosis, and there's centers now where it's, you know, kind of like you guys do, where it's holistic. They bring in psychotherapists, yoga, obstetrical care, everything. And every single person has a better result than just, you know, just getting a surgery when you have that whole team around you. And I think there's only going to be more and more data coming out showing how important the network is in like mind, body, soul when you're going through any sort of illness. So,
well, the data is very present and very clear. You know, this is a realm that's been studied for years. The hard part is getting that data to action. And, you know, that there's usually several years in between getting the data and doing the research and bringing it to fruition.
Right.
Because if you Google, you know, cancer and exercise, cancer and nutrition, cancer and relaxation, stress management importance in cancer, it's extremely clear that it's not just medicine alone that creates that kind of healing or that kind of change, that positive change. There's so many more things that are involved.
Absolutely. So we've touched on a lot of things, but are there other ways that we haven't discussed that you collaborate with healthcare practitioners or hospital systems or the CLSCs?
I'll tag that question off to Sandy.
Okay.
We do actually. We collaborate quite well. We get referrals from different hospitals, most all hospitals, and also word of mouth. So that's one big part is I navigate with the participant how to collaborate with the different resources and assistance, CLSC, Nova West Island. So with that, they have a great team at the hospital. So I just help them advocate themselves, empower themselves to discuss with their medical team what assistance that they would need at home. And that's when I help them step by step of requesting the referrals to the CLSC. And CLSC, I have to say, they refer a lot to us also, and they communicate with us a lot also when they do not have certain resources. So it's a big one-on-one, you know, every day it's different referrals from different people.
Okay. That's great. I'm so happy that you built that system. And one of the hardest things I think with a diagnosis is navigating the medical system. It's, you know, I had my neighbor the other day came and knocked on my door. I said, I have a medical emergency. Do you have a fax machine? I need to fax this into the hospital. And it's like, why aren't people scanning documents? You know, it's just like, why is everything so difficult? It's a tough system to navigate and to know the ins and outs and which doctor, you know, it's anyways, I think it's really great that you can help people navigate, because that's what I constantly hear with the medical system. And my friend is a doctor too. We talk about this all the time. It's like such a frustrating system to navigate, a social medical system. So I'm happy to hear that you guys have a good network.
If I can add, it is. And I think by empowering and advocating the participants to explain to them the certain roles are in CLSCs and hospitals. And so for them to understand when navigating who to go and see and what to do and what to ask for, you know, and that's one of the big things that we've done before the pandemic, but a lot during the pandemic because of, you know, scared and reassurance, how to communicate. So it was one of the big things and continue to be an assistance for them.
Okay. On that topic, is there a way for low mobility patients to access the West Island Cancer Wellness Center or to have access to certain resources if they can't make it to the center? Or
Absolutely. I mean, if they can make it to the center, the building is low mobility accessible.
Great.
So we made sure that when we designed the new building that anyone would be able to get through our front door. We also have an elevator to accommodate. Now, I think that's one of the things that we've prided ourselves in is making sure that no matter who you are, what age, what situation, which cancer, where you live, we can provide services to you. We might have to get creative, which we have learned to be a lot over the last 14 years. But also we have our remote services, and luckily, I'll give a little plug for Zoom. Zoom has closed captioning as well for anybody who might have some auditory difficulties. So we do our best to try to be present for anyone who just needs us.
Okay. Speaking of creativity, how did you guys pivot? I guess this is more directed at Sandy. How did you guys pivot with all the challenges you faced during COVID-19? So, what kind of repercussions were you faced with at the beginning?
I mean, definitely for us, when the pandemic happened, if we go back to March 13th when we closed, definitely our big team got together to discuss what would be best for our participants. Because of the isolation at home, people were not going to their appointments. So what we did is we created a 24/7 phone line that was open to anybody who would call the center. And we'd assess that and see. We also implemented some volunteers who did regular calls with our participants. So what they would do is they would assess how they're doing, if they're living alone, if they have family, how's it going with their treatment, do they need drives, because they had to deal with a lot of transportation that was not available anymore.
Okay.
And if they needed other resources, as you know, groceries, would email or give them information how to get groceries. If I can give an example of a client, a participant who lived at home alone, isolated, who actually has just come out maybe a month ago since March 13th from isolation. She would just go to her treatments and back. And even with her treatments is to help her navigate to get a transport. So to feel confident, to get a graduated participant who helped her to drive her and drop her off. And her isolation, which she was able to do virtually some programs with us and continues. And deliver her basically a hobby she did was knitting. I mean, I could add many things, but just the last note is that she loved knitting and could not go out to shop for knitting, or which we had a big donation. And so we delivered some wool to her and to make things. So little things like that was very, very helpful to them.
During the pandemic, a lot of doctors transitioned into telemedicine. Did you feel any of those repercussions, or have any participants who felt the repercussions of that, or were there any delays in diagnosis because of that?
Yes, actually, because the lack of direct between the patient and the oncologist, what that gave is their well-being, the sense of security, especially in those times. They become more increased in anxiety because of not the closeness, and actually the lack of not being familiar with telemedicine. A lot of people don't have computers, couldn't use internet, and it's by phone and the visual, the contact. So definitely was very, very difficult. And having to have family come to help them because of that, definitely it's been really, but a constant reassurance that they would call us and steps what to do, prepare them with questions before they would have a telemedicine call with their doctor. So we helped in a lot of different ways for that.
That's so important, because what I always hear is, you hang up the phone and then you think of all the questions that you wanted to ask. So that's really great that you guys were able to do that for them.
Well, that's why when we had the phone 24/7 and we continue, is you would hear it when you'd answer the phone, and they would almost cry on the phone and say, "Oh my God, I can hear a voice instead of getting a voicemail every time."
Oh.
You know, it was really, that was nice for them to have, and continue to have.
Yeah, I really can't imagine going through all of that during the pandemic. It must have been very hard.
Yes.
Well, so many things changed for the cancer patient, right? It wasn't only this fear factor of going into the hospital or going to physically see your doctor. There was the reality that was very difficult to do. But on top of that, it almost made us as a community minimize our ailments. So, you know, I might feel a lump, or I might not feel well. Oh, but that's okay. You know, I don't want to go to the hospital because that's the bigger fear. I don't want to see a doctor because that's the bigger fear. So that was one thing that happened. But the other reality was, if you were diagnosed and you had to go into the hospital, the most beautiful thing about what the hospitals do, and a large part of what we do, is that emotional comfort care. You know, if you're going into chemotherapy and you're sitting in a chair, there's always this lovely volunteer that'll come around and chat with you and offer you support. Or if you come into the Cancer Wellness Center, you're surrounded with amazing volunteers who, you know, will see if you want a cup of tea, or if you know where you're going in the building. But that stopped. You know, that whole sense of cancer community, that brings on this hope, diminished. It vanished. And that made the experience even more difficult. And still is. I mean, it's slowly vamping up again. But even in our building, you know, we used to have groups of people that would sit around and talk over a cup of tea.
Every time I went.
Absolutely. And now we're still wearing masks. We're still keeping our meter distance. Our support groups are diminished in size because the room that originally took 12 can now only take 5 safely. Yeah. You know, all those things are still very present. And the way that, as Sandy said, that we've tried to sort of combat that is to increase our one-on-ones, to increase that touch point, to say, you know, are you okay, and what do you...
I keep talking about us being in the post-pandemic world, but that's such a privileged statement. You know, people who are immunocompromised, people who are going through a physical challenge that's very real.
Sure.
As I mentioned earlier, it is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about breast health today. So Sandy, I was wondering if you know what women should be doing from home. How should they be doing exams? How often? What should that look like to do a breast exam?
Well, definitely breast health is self-awareness, needing to know exactly how to do a breast exam. The first thing would be to really personally know about your breast, which they give great videos out there of how to do that. You have it with the nationalbreastcancer.org, or you have it with the breastcancer.org, which is they have videos of really looking at yourself in the mirror and to make sure what you see and if you notice any abnormalities. So you definitely not just examine your breast, you really have to examine the whole breast, the collarbone, under the armpits. Even, people don't realize, but to really examine the appearance of your nipples, the dryness, if your nipple goes inward. So there's many different things that you have to be aware of. And if you find, it's easy if you do find the 5 steps that they say for breasts to do at home. And if you do find something, to really communicate with your health provider and see what the next steps would be.
Okay. If they do find something abnormal, do you recommend they go straight to their family doctor or to a hospital?
Well, that was a big question, especially during the pandemic. I'd assessed really exactly what the priority was. And a lot of the doctors were able to receive emails. So some of them received emails or they were able to call. First would be their GP because they did not have an oncologist yet. So the GP, and then the GP before they would prescribe some test to make sure. Because with the pandemic, they were unable to go in person and to really do the exam themselves. So sometimes they would send them, but there was always delays also, in the tests of mammograms or ultrasounds. So a lot of the private clinics started to open there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also want to add to it that there's a little bit of a myth that breast cancer can be felt by doing a self-exam.
Okay.
Sometimes people have dense breasts, and sometimes the calcification that could be signs of breast cancer is so deep within the breast tissue that it's never felt. So the important message here is if you are in a risk factor, you have a family history of breast cancer, for example, or you're over the age of 50, you should be going for a regular mammogram. And those mammograms should be checked annually, or at least every 2 years if there's no history. Checked against each other, as your baseline, to make sure that there is no changes in your breast tissue.
So is mammogram still the gold standard? Because I was talking to somebody who lives in the States, and they were explaining that there has been a big shift there to ultrasound. I don't know.
I think basically they would evaluate everything. It depends on the person. Okay, you have certain factors if it would be an ultrasound first or a mammogram. I mean, definitely with the medical team, they would see all the factors of their age, their weight, the reason why the imaging, and what risk factors that they have, if they have it in their history in that. Because the difference of the mammogram and ultrasound is, they would say, they still do, is breast ultrasounds are better and accurate for women younger than 45 years, okay? Or mammograms is preferred for women older than 45. But the rule of thumb is you get your mammogram first, and then it's determined exactly the results. And if the medical provider decides to do an ultrasound after, that's to decide if all the facts found in the results.
Okay. A friend of mine who works for this company called Stryker, they're like a medical equipment provider. They were telling me that they had this campaign, which I found interesting. It was called Know Your Options. So they really try to highlight new technologies, new therapies, treatment options. Do you guys know anything that might be on the rise or something that new that people have been talking about that, let's say, somebody who has just gotten a breast cancer diagnosis could look into?
I don't know if I can answer on that. I know that the mammograms have been much better than they were before. And I remember even before the pandemic, I had gone to a workshop, especially for breast cancer, and that these mammograms were much more efficient and would detect indensed and would be able to detect cancer that's not even started yet and 5 years before.
Okay.
I love the idea of that topic, know your options, because I think that that's an empowering statement. And as women with breasts, breast cancer is obviously not just a woman disease, but since we are women, I think it's important for us to learn how to advocate for ourselves. And sometimes, particularly in the older generation, there almost is this sense of not being able to advocate. I don't want to be the bad patient, or I don't want to disagree with my doctor. But the reality is we have at our fingertips incredible resources that we can reach out to get that kind of information and to learn about different treatments all over the world. That I think is essential so that we do know our options. I will put a little caveat in there and say that's not Dr. Google, because there is a lot of people who will just jump onto the internet and start researching all kinds of different alternative approaches to treatment. And it's a rabbit hole that could be very dangerous. So what we recommend to people is reach out to us. We know the healthy, fair, empirically based resources that somebody can turn to. And that includes complementary medicines. But don't, try to stay away from just spending endless hours going down assorted rabbit holes that could actually be.
I could not agree more. That is one of the reasons that I started this podcast, is because as much good as there is in the wellness world, there is also a lot of bad, a lot of shame, a lot of misinformation. You go online now and it's like, don't eat sugar, don't eat gluten, don't eat lactose, don't do this, there's just a million rules now. And you, like you said, you can go down a rabbit hole. And I remember seeing this one person that was, and this was at the time where I was working at the center, and she was this, I guess, a naturopath or something like that. And she was saying getting a cancer diagnosis is a gift. And I was like, this is just so wrong, there's this sense in the wellness world sometimes that if you get an illness, it's your fault, you did something wrong, or you're inherently flawed if you can't heal yourself. Yeah. And I hate that message. And I love that. Yeah. And I've said this already, but I just love that you guys bridge the gap in the two worlds in a healthy way.
In most cases, getting a disease is not to be blamed. You are not to be blamed. You are not necessarily responsible. And what we're about is teaching people that it's not about blame. It's not about responsibility. It's about empowerment. What do you want to do with it now? What can you do to help yourself through it, to make you feel stronger, even if the trajectory is to death, which we know it can be when you get a cancer. But there are ways to live well all through that and to die well. We have made that is an amazing change in the legislature that gives us the opportunity to choose our death. We have an incredible palliative care movement. So, again, it's taking control of your situation and feeling empowered to be able to make decisions.
I love that message. I didn't mention this earlier, but Debbie, you're a clinical psychologist on top of being the founder of the West Island Cancer Wellness Center. So I was curious, do you still practice psychology today?
I do. Okay. I have my own private practice on the side. I don't offer psychological consultations for any of the participants who come through the Cancer Wellness Center, but I do offer supervision to the interns that we have here. And every year we have several interns who offer those services. So it helps me to stay connected to our participants as well.
You just mentioned empowerment, but would you have any other advice for somebody who just recently got a diagnosis?
I think one of the most important things when you receive that kind of information is to allow yourself to feel it. There's a lot of, for lack of a better word, pressure for cancer patients to be positive. And you can't be positive if you ignore the difficult emotions that you're having. So allow yourself and family members, allow your loved ones to be whatever they are, and to be present with them in whatever emotion that they're having at the time. I think that's part of the beginning of the process. And then I would highly recommend, reaching out to organizations such as ours to find out what else can you do, what else, what are the resources in your community, where can you get the most viable information? Because it's not, no matter what the original diagnosis is, being a stage 1 breast cancer or a metastatic breast cancer, or any other cancer, it's still super hard to hear it. And although we have a 75% plus success rate in getting over cancer, you still have to learn 100% of the time how to live with cancer once you've been diagnosed. And that can be challenging. So allow yourself to have the feelings, seek out the help you need to get you through the experience, both you and your family and your friends, and continue to communicate.
Something else that I noticed or picked up on when I was volunteering there is I heard a few times from participants who were in remission was they were saying that they don't know how to live now. You know, cancer took over their life and it became such a big part of their identity that they don't know how to go forward. I'm wondering if that's something that you notice coming up a lot, and I guess in the same aspect as the last question, would you have any advice or counsel for somebody who's going through remission and who still feels like they're struggling?
Yeah, it's an absolute excellent question, because what happens frequently is when your friends and family and in some cases your medical community say it's over, like you're done, you've gotten through it, you're a survivor, everybody around you wants to rejoice. And the cancer patient sometimes is sort of in a state of, okay, now what? Nobody's watching the cancer. I'm not actively treating it. What do I do with all these emotions and experiences that I'm having? It is known to be one of the most difficult times of the cancer trajectory. And I highly suggest to your listeners to be careful of that. Because if you're telling people, well, you should be happy, I don't understand why you're sad, and why are you talking about cancer now? You're done, you're finished, move on, and they're not at that place, you're actually making the person feel like they're not doing it right, or that they don't have the right to feel the way they're feeling. You know, we have a support group specifically for people who are finished treatment, for this exact reason, because it is a phenomenon, and it's a true phenomenon.
Also, the fear that must come with that. You know, I don't know the statistics, but I assume that, because I remember when I went to the center, actually, the definition of remission was not what I thought that it was. I don't know if you know what it is exactly, but it is a longer time, right? It's not just one scan and it's not there and you're in remission. It takes a long time, and that always comes with the fear of what if it comes back, and how do you let go of that? How do you move forward?
Well, the fear of recurrence is what I was speaking to about before, of 100% of the time having to learn how to live with it. That goes on forever. You know, it every different sensation that you have in your body, that idea will pop into your head. It's really important that we learn how to give that idea its importance, but not allow it to sort of encompass us and become us. You know, one of the reasons why the Cancer Wellness Center has a graduation date, which is 1 year post-treatment, so the one year after all treatment is over, is because we really believe that in order to live with cancer, you have to live through it and be with it and find some peace in it, and not be stuck in this kind of cancer world where you're constantly being surrounded with people who are getting sick and possibly dying.
Absolutely. Lastly, on the subject of psychology, I remember, well, I know at the center you offer a lot of resources for caregivers, and I was wondering if you could explain to the listeners what caregiver burnout is and why it was so important for you to have resources for caregivers at the center.
Yeah, excellent question. You know, at the center, we call people participants. And once you've registered to be a participant at the center, unless you tell us who you are and how cancer impacts your world, everybody is the same. And so in one class, you can have a caregiver or 3 caregivers and 5 cancer patients. And the reason we bring it together to call it participants is because the experience, albeit different, is still extremely difficult for the caregiver or the carer, or the friend who's trying to be the support network. Mm-hmm. And again, although it's different, caregivers tend to have this idea that what I'm experiencing is less important than what the cancer patient is experiencing. Mm-hmm. And theoretically, that's just not true. It's as important. And it's one of our biggest challenges as an organization because we hear it constantly. Mm-hmm. We'll have a support group that is specifically for caregivers, and originally it'll get filled, but as the time goes on, it'll dwindle because the caregiver will choose to be the carer of their loved one over taking care of themselves. And that's just dangerous. Mm-hmm. We all know that if we spend too much time caring for others and not enough time caring for ourselves, we will get sick. Mm-hmm. So, that message of caring for yourself is one I'm sure that you teach on a daily basis, no matter what you're experiencing. If mm-hmm. you don't have that as being a high priority, then the probability of burnout increases dramatically.
How does it work with caregivers if, let's say, their loved one isn't a participant? Can they still come to the center?
Yes, absolutely. Again, because it's not just about the person who is going through the treatment at the time. Mm-hmm. We have many people whose their loved one just doesn't want to have yet another visit or do another meeting or do another class, mm-hmm. And they choose to not belong, not register. It's not frequent because, again, there's that whole caregiver phenomena that we are trying to shoot against, mm-hmm. but we'll never say no to that kind of thing.
Okay. Speaking of supporting ourselves, you guys must live through several difficult moments working mm-hmm. at the center. So I was curious, what do you find most difficult about it and how do you support yourself?
I think what I might add to that statement is we also experienced some absolute amazing experiences. And I mm-hmm. think having that as a nice balance does help to take care of ourselves. We'll frequently share stories amongst particularly the staff who aren't on the first floor, who don't get to experience the power of what we do. Mm-hmm. We'll frequently share those, not people's names, obviously, because confidentiality mm-hmm. is incredibly important, but the message of what we do and how we do it. So that is probably the thing that makes us flourish, makes us feel like what we're doing is so incredibly important. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that we do is we work 4 days a week. So we have our wellness day. We have our, I call it my Debbie day, where I do things that's just for me. Granted, sometimes that is going to do my groceries, but other times that is going to play golf and having breakfast with friends and getting the support that I need, to get me through the amazing work that I am so incredibly honored to do.
Beautifully put. So for the West Island Cancer Wellness Center, do you have any, we've talked a little bit about, having this on a national scale. Do you have any long-term goals for the Wellness Center?
Getting it to go national was a really, really important goal that I didn't know existed until I researched how many provinces don't have cancer wellness centers. So that was big. I think moving forward, I'm probably heading more towards retirement and allowing some younger person to come in and bring it to whatever amazing level it's going to go next.
How can someone listening support the West Island Cancer Wellness Center?
I think there's two messages there. The first message would be help us to help anybody who's living through cancer right now. Help spread the word, help to give people our phone number or our website so that they can connect with us so that we can do everything in our power to be able to help them. And then the second message would be from my fundraising cap, which if I could say briefly, we don't receive government funding. We do all of our own fundraising here in the center. So a donation would be fantastic. And to know that every single donation dollar that we receive goes directly back into the organization. It's how we exist.
If somebody wants to volunteer, I know we spoke more about therapeutic points of view. If somebody isn't a therapist, whether that's physio, Reiki, yoga, centrics, all the things that we mentioned previously, are there ways for them to volunteer also?
Absolutely. We are a big organization that is fundamentally, I want to say, run by volunteers. So all our professionals, as you mentioned, are volunteers. They're experts in their community, like yourself. And that's how we keep our operational budget lower. But we also have incredible, reception support staff that greet you when you come in. When we do our registrations, those are volunteers as well. We have our navigators who are volunteers as well. And then when we run our fundraising events, we have people who just come in and work on those with us. So there's always opportunity to volunteer for charities. And all information about us, about our fundraising events, about our volunteer opportunities, about why we do what we do, or even our programming calendar can be found on our website. So that's wicwc.org.
And that would be the best place to reach someone, to reach the organization, also to either register as a participant or seek out volunteer opportunities.
Absolutely. And if you're not, comfortable on the computer, then you can just give us a phone call at 514-695-9355.
Perfect. Is there any message you'd like to put out there before we end our conversation?
Maybe it's just simply to reiterate how if cancer enters your life, you don't have to do it alone. And that we welcome you to help you and support you and help you feel more empowered along the way. And to just simply give us a call or check us out online.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome, Riley.
You know how much we appreciate your work. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Sandy, also. And have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Bye-bye.